Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining me today for another Twilight Zone video on my Twilight Zone ranking series where I rank every episode of the original Twilight Zone from my least favorite to my favorite. Today I'm going to be talking about number 36, The Last Flight, written by Richard Matheson, directed by William F. Claxton. This is a season 1 episode, and as always there will be spoilers. So The Last Flight is yet another season 1 classic in my opinion, and yet another time travel episode. There's quite a few of those in the Twilight Zone. And I think this is definitely one of the best time travel episodes. This episode is a classic redemption story, and in my view, those almost always work when they are done well, and I think this one is done very, very well. This is a very fast-paced and involving episode that I think is interesting from beginning to end. Kenneth Haig gives a strong performance in the lead as Lieutenant Decker, and the rest of the cast is fine in support. So this episode starts with our main character, Lieutenant Decker, landing at an Air Force base, and Decker seems a bit confused by the modern aircraft that he sees. He is taken for questioning to a General Harper, and Decker identifies himself, but things aren't really lining up. The things that Decker is saying seem to be from another time period. They seem to be from the past. So confused, Decker asks where he is and eventually finds out he is in 1959 when he thinks it's 1917. So at this point, Decker tells General Harper and the others he's with that he and his partner were in a shootout basically, and that his partner was shot down, but he escaped through a cloud somehow. Things get more complicated when the others tell Decker that his partner, whose name was McKay, is alive and coming to the base that day for an inspection. Decker can't understand this, and eventually we learn the true story, which is that Decker really tried to avoid fighting and abandon McKay, and he can't understand how McKay could have survived. So eventually Decker figures out that he must have somehow been given a second chance or a chance at redemption and gone back to save McKay. So Decker escapes from the base. He gets into his plane and is stopped as they pull a gun on him, but he tells the man that was after him named Wilson that he will have to shoot him to stop him, so Wilson lets him go. So now General Harper is upset with Wilson for letting Decker go, but when McKay arrives he tells the general that that was the man that saved his life. So it turns out that McKay thought Decker left him alone, but came back and shot down some of the enemy planes. So now Harper and Wilson are starting to believe this story that Decker told them, and they show McKay some of Decker's personal items. They also tell McKay he might want to sit down and call him by a nickname that they couldn't possibly have known. So this is a classic redemption story. What's impressive to me about this episode is how involving the plot is for a half-hour story, and yet I was still invested in the characters, especially Decker. So great job by Richard Matheson on the script. So overall I think The Last Flight is a very complex episode, but it still flows very well with very great characters and a great story, and it's pretty impressive for a show from the late 50s and early 60s. I could definitely see this episode being an influence on many of the better time travel stories out there, and that's why The Last Flight comes in for me at number 36 on the list. And this is another one of those season 1 episodes I think maybe goes a little bit under the radar because there's so many classics, but I do think it's definitely a worthy episode. So as always, feel free to let me know what you thought of this episode, The Last Flight, if you liked it or not. Thanks very much for your support, and thanks for watching.